This podcast does not provide medical advice. Please listen to the complete disclosure at the end of the recording.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Everyone Dies, the podcast. I'm Marianne Matzo.
And I'm Charlie Navarrete.
So grab your adult beverage, your tea, your coffee, I don't know, whatever the heck you're drinking nowadays. Get some dessert, relax, and thank you for spending the next hour with Charlie and I as we talk about ideas for food to serve at a Southern funeral. In the second half, I'm going to talk about idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. And in our third half, Charlie is going to do a segment called Work to Death.
Says you.
So, Charlie.
Yes.
Have you ever been to a funeral in the South?
Would eating too many pieces of Popeye's chicken in Louisiana count?
I don't think so.
Oh.
So, Southern Living, which is a wonderful magazine of great food and all kinds of things.
Oh, where's it located?
In the South, did a story about classic comfort dishes that you'll see on every Southern funeral spread.
Does the South Bronx count?
Nope, that's not that.
That's not Southern enough. Okay.
In Southern enough. So, Charlie.
Yes.
Tell us about Southern funerals from your reading in Southern Living magazine.
Oh, yes, of course. First, Southern funerals are generally, in the South, below the South Bronx, way below the South Bronx. And
below the Mason-Dixon line.
Yes, that far south. And additionally, it's a funeral.
Mm-hmm. So somebody has died.
That's what usually happens at a funeral. So, but you know what? And all kidding aside, it's a big spread. I mean, it looks like it's a celebration. I mean, imagine the holidays, and that's what it is. It's a huge potluck, and all sorts of casseroles, a lot of homemade stuff, salads, warm salads, cold salads, hams. I mean, yes. I mean, smoked and just, everything you see on the Food Network, just these wonderful hams, chickens, homemade cornbread, homemade biscuits, baskets of rolls. I mean, it's enough to keep Henry VIII happy.
So is it true that nobody in the world eats better than a bereaved Southerner?
I'm going to say yes. That is true. In the interest of diplomacy, yes, that's true. And let me, I'm trying to think with some of the, with the salad. Oh my God, have you ever had home? Okay, I mean, people make potato salad all the time, but yeah, what you're talking about, like in the South, like different regions of the country, it's just even something that you take for granted as a potato salad. It just, I don't know, it just has a flavor and a taste all their own, and of course it's homemade, and people just add their own ingredients. But there's potato salad, scallop potatoes are also a big thing down there.
So I was looking at this, and it says that when I was reading, it said that the Southern funeral food is all about providing comfort to those in attendance and honoring those who are not. So the potato salad, there's one that I saw called the Shout Alleluia potato salad. Did you read about that?
Yeah, but I'm not. But you know what? I don't remember why it's shout. You just shout out because it's so great. I'm sorry. I don't remember.
You take a bite of the potato salad and you say, "Hallelujah! This stuff's good."
Oh,
Of course, I'm from Detroit, so I probably am not saying the Alleluia right. But,
you're not. Wait a minute, aren't you from the southern part of Detroit, South Detroit?
Well, I am. I am from Lincoln Park, which is south of Detroit.
Well, there we are. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not south of the Mason-Dixon line, so I'm not thinking that
right.
that counts.
Probably still doesn't count. Anyways, okay.
So we're gonna post on our website along with this podcast the recipe for this Shout Alleluia potato salad that comes from the Southern Foodways Alliance Community Cookbook from Oxford, Mississippi. And then you were talking about scalloped potatoes.
Yeah. And I just remember having, I've had them north of the Mason-Dixon as well, but it's just something about with Parmesan cheese. It's just, it's I don't know, it's just like integrated into it. It's not just somebody threw it on top as an afterthought.
Because cheese as an afterthought just never really quite does it for me.
No. But this thing, it just blends in with it. And again, everything just, I don't know, just meets and melds into this wonderful
and greets.
Scallop. Better than anything you'll find in the frozen food section of your grocery store. Yeah.
So we're going to post a recipe for classic Parmesan scalloped potatoes, which is a cheesy scalloped potato that fosters camaraderie between Southerners like no other, making the dish a great big helping of comfort during grieving.
And I helped.
Yeah. And then what's the third food that we're going to talk about? So there's a turkey noodle poppy seed casserole.
That's right. Okay,
no funeral spread would be right without poppy seed casserole, right?
Yeah, and nothing against turkey noodle poppy seed casserole, but it just didn't. I don't get it. Is it just instead of like like cut up instead of like chicken, just cut up pieces of turkey and with noodles and remember tuna noodle casserole when we were kids?
God, I hated that. That was like the Friday Catholic food.
So
really disgusting.
So the turkey noodle, I assume, is
you know what?
Instead of tuna, Charlie, turkey.
Well, you're going to have to, your assignment will be to go to the website and read the recipe because I don't have it here. But from what I read, it's required. And I think one of the things, and when I was reading this article, is that it's the leftovers that also are incredible because nothing takes care of leftovers quite like a casserole that uses a little of this and a little of that to create a delicious meal. So this turkey noodle poppy seed casserole is a mouthful. It was first published in November 1990 in Southern Living magazine. And it uses like everything in your pantry that you already have there.
So everything in the kitchen sink, okay.
So it's got egg noodles or whatever pasta you've got laying around, green pepper, red pepper, some Tabasco. You can create it, put it together ahead of time, keep it in the fridge, and just toss it in the oven whenever you're ready to eat it. Add a salad, some bread, and you got yourself a meal, brother.
I would imagine cheese. Because it seems to me, if no matter what the ingredients are, if it's covered in cheese, you just never go wrong with that.
You know, I think you could just melt cheese. Did you ever see that was it? I don't know if it was on HBO or where it was. You know, Jeff Garland, the comedian.
Oh, yeah. From not Seinfeld.
Larry David.
Thank you. Jeez, Seinfeld. Yes.
Yeah, Larry David. He did one about dating that was called "I Just Want Someone to Eat Cheese With." And when I was dating, I was thinking, like, I just want someone to eat cheese with. I could really relate to that.
Mm.
Can't you?
Actually, yes, I can. Yes. And what is your cheese of preference?
Oh, it's got to be mozzarella. Especially like really good fresh mozzarella. Like this summer, I grew tomatoes and basil.
Yeah.
And I would slice the tomatoes and slice the mozzarella and layer it with the basil and put just a little vinaigrette over it. Oh my God, it's just
sounds great.
Die and go to heaven. Yeah. Simple, easy peasy. So wonderful.
Actually, it's interesting. This is with the scalloped potatoes that it was Parmesan. For me, Parmesan, fresh Parmesan. Just get a big chunk of it and just, tear off pieces and, just have, pieces of Parmesan like M&Ms. Just, fresh.
Really?
Oh, yeah, fresh Parmesan.
Just like that?
Yep, just like that. Maybe sometime with a little wine, but that. Yeah.
I've never just kind of eaten it like that. Like I've had it like grated, over pasta. Oh, that's wonderful.
Though, what I've taken to the last several years, to go to an Italian restaurant and order like a little plate with olive oil in it and grated Parmesan. Throw that into that olive oil and some fresh bread. Yeah, that's like a meal for me.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I like that a lot.
You eat a whole loaf of bread, it fills you up.
No, of course not. I would never do that. Nope. No.
So all of these recipes are going to be available on the website. We hope that you're going to cook them and let us know. And let us know if the turkey noodle poppy seed casserole is as better than the tuna casserole that we hated as children.
Actually, maybe I shouldn't say that. Actually, no, but was it? No, it was after. So it was junior high. I think it was junior high. I don't know. The kitchen staff just always made a great tuna noodle casserole. But that was it. I mean, forget high school, forget college. But I do remember. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was in junior high school. Okay.
Huh. Well, something good happened there then.
Got it. Share something boring with everyone. So listen for these recipes. So for these recipes,
we want to please you with our recipes.
Yeah. So for these recipes, please go to everyonedies.org. That's dies.org, and send us your own recipes to share with others. Also, we appreciate your questions, jokes, and anything you want to tell us. Yeah, okay, anything you want to tell us. You can email us again at everyonedies.org, dies.org, and please join our Facebook group, Everyone Dies, and remember to rate and review this podcast. Molly, our Twitter wench, is hoping you contribute to her happiness by following us on Twitter and responding to her tweets and reposting her tweets.
Oh, that makes her so excited.
It does.
It does. So
what do we got next?
Charlie, we're going to talk about a disease today.
Oh.
And it's called Idiopathic Pulmonary Fibrosis, or IPF.
Oh, so something light. Okay, good.
Yeah, something light. And, you might feel like you're in a science class for a little while, but hang with me. There's resources on our webpage about this disease and support and that kind of thing. So this is a disease that is,
oh, excuse me. Sorry.
That's a good lean in for this talk.
There we are, my lungs. So I'm sorry. So what?
So this disease is really, really serious. Now, we talk about a lot of really serious and, of course, given the name of our show. But this is a disease that they really don't know a whole lot about.
Yeah.
And there aren't a lot of options for treatment. The only thing that they have is a couple of drugs to hopefully slow down the disease. But the only treatment for it is lung, to get a new lung. So I want to talk about what this disease is, kind of how it works. So we're going to do just a little bit of anatomy and physiology, and then I'll tell you more about this disease.
Alrighty.
So, you have two lungs, right? And,
two. Okay.
Two.
Sure.
Yes,
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
You have two. And inside the lungs, like if it was just a smooth surface, the purpose of the lungs is to get the oxygen that we breathe in into our bloodstream. And once it goes into the bloodstream, it's going to go to our heart, into our brain, and it's going to oxygenate. It's the term when the oxygen moves around, it oxygenates all of our tissues, and our tissues have to stay oxygenated in order for us to live. So in the design of the lungs, though, if you have just a smooth surface in order to help the oxygen go from inside the lungs into the blood, that's not very efficient. So there are these like little bubbles that are called alveoli. It's A-V-I-O-L-I. And, it kind of sounds like an Italian dish to me, but that's maybe just because I'm Italian.
As long as we can put a little Parmesan on it, it's fine.
Yes, that would make you happy. So anyway,
like
these
alveoli,
I want you to think of them as like a bunch of grapes. Okay. And so a bunch of grapes gives a lot more surface area for the oxygen to kind of go around it and for that oxygen to go into the blood. Okay? So the alveoli make more surface area for the oxygen to move into the lungs. That's the purpose of them. Okay?
Okay.
So in IPF, in idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, what happens is that these alveoli become scarred and stiff and thick and damaged. And what happens is then the air can't be exchanged. The oxygen can't get into the blood. So if you don't, you're breathing along and you're counting on your heart to beat and to move the blood and, everything to run the way it does. But if the oxygen can't get into your blood, what are you going to do? You're going to feel like you can't breathe. And with the stiffening and scarred kind of alveoli in the lungs, there's also a variety of other symptoms that go with it. So that's the physiology of what's happening in this disease. So IPF, or idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, is a rare disease, but it's terminal without a lung transplant.
Ooh.
There are some drugs that are available that can help slow the progression. Some people do okay on them. Some people don't. Some people, even though they take the drugs, it still progresses and it can progress very quickly. And actually, we have a really good interview that will be coming out on Wednesday with somebody who was quite young when he got this disease, and it progressed phenomenally quickly for him. And he was fortunate to be able to get a lung transplant and is doing really well 5 years later. But for some people who get this disease, it can progress very quickly and lead to death. So this disease affects the tissue surrounding the air sacs, the alveoli that are in the lungs. And it occurs when the lung tissue becomes thick and stiff. And they don't really know why it happens. They're now looking into a genetic component. Like maybe this is something that there's, that there's a genetic line that runs throughout families, and it can have various degrees of severity. But this disease over time is going to cause permanent scarring of the lungs, which is the fibrosis part of it, that makes it progressively more difficult to breathe. Now, your risk of IPF is higher if you smoke or you have a family history of IPF. And the risk will increase with age, although some young people quite young will get it. The most common symptoms of IPF are shortness of breath and a cough. Some people may not have symptoms at first, but signs and symptoms can develop and get much worse as the disease progresses. And some people will talk about, like a cough that they just cannot get rid of, or coughing fits that, go on for an hour. Now, if you've ever just had a cough and you finally able to clear it after, a second or two, you think, oh my God, that was horrible. But imagine coughing for an hour and not being able to get it in control.
Wow.
The way IPF advances varies from person to person, and the scarring can happen slowly or it can happen quickly. For some people, the disease stays the same for years. In other people, it'll rapidly decline. They might have times where if they're exposed to a lot of smoke or changes in altitude, things like that they might have an exacerbation, meaning that the symptoms become much, much worse. Other complications of IPF include pulmonary hypertension and respiratory failure, which happens when the lungs cannot deliver enough oxygen into the bloodstream without support. This prevents the brain and other organs from getting the oxygen that they need. So how do you know that this could be what it is? And in our interview, and which is pretty kind of classic with IPF, the person we talked about how his doctor did not know what he had. And it wasn't until he went to pulmonary rehab that the rehab person said, seems like this is what you have. He went to a pulmonologist who specializes in IPF and was finally diagnosed. So what are some of the symptoms?
So how long did that take? So how long did that take before, when he first had this?
It was months.
Oh,
it was months. So because it's easy enough, when I tell you the symptoms, it's easy enough to say, oh, well, what else could it be? So it starts with shortness of breath on exertion. Now, if you're overweight, if you smoke, you can get short of breath on exertion, There's a mild, dry cough. Then it'll progress to shortness of breath at rest. So you're just sitting,
okay,
but you're short of breath.
Yeah,
it sounds like, you've walked really fast, up the subway steps or whatever. But imagine feeling that way just sitting.
Just sitting there, right.
Yeah. Out of control coughing. Fatigue, weight loss. And another thing that you can see is what's called clubbing of the fingers and the toes. And this is where the nails of the fingers and the toes are wider and rounder than, instead of tapered, like if you look at your fingers,
sure.
they're kind of tapered.
Right.
But clubbing of the fingers and toes is another thing that you'll see. And this guy actually had it. He never noticed it. And it was the rehab person who said, how long have your fingers been like that? So all of these symptoms can lead to respiratory failure, pneumonia, collapsed lung, heart failure, and death. The risk of IPF increases as you age. Usually it occurs in people over the age of 50. It's most often diagnosed in people in their 60s and 70s. 35 to 40% of the risk for developing IPF is genetic. So it really does run in families. And cystic fibrosis will run in families. It's a different disease, but it is a lung disease.
Yeah.
Scientists have found that there's mutations in certain genes that are common among people who have IPF. Some of these genes help the body make surfactant and mucus, and the surfactants kind of help the lungs be able to move efficiently, and the changes in the mucus, which are important for healthy lung function. Some genes, there's a protein that helps clear out bacteria from the lungs that might have a mutation. So they're looking at probably about 8 different genes that may be responsible for affecting people in IPF. And it might be that IPF isn't just one disease. Maybe it's 6 different diseases, but it's right now, because we know so little of it, it's just all under this one category.
Yeah.
Lifestyle habits, smoking is a common risk factor for people who have IPF, and it's usually for people who have a greater than a 20-year pack smoking history. Okay. So do you know what a pack year is when you're talking about smoking? Here's a little trivia thing for you.
Brother. No, I used to. No, I don't remember.
You used to? So pack year history is how much you smoke for how long. So let's say you smoke 20 packs of cigarettes a day for a year. That gives you a 20-pack year cigarette history. Okay. Let's say you smoke 1 pack of cigarettes a day for 20 years. That gives you a 20-pack year smoking history. So it's the accumulated damage to your lungs of how much you smoke over how long you smoke. So you can say, well, I only smoke a half a pack of cigarettes a day. But if you started that at age 10, you would have a 20-pack year cigarette history in, 40 years. So at age 50, you would have that 20-year pack year smoke history. But it is also true, though, that there are people who have IPF who have never smoked. And those are probably those people who have that genetic link.
Okay, sure.
IPF is more common among men than women and more older people. Currently, there are no screening methods to determine who's going to develop IPF. If you have certain risk factors, especially a family history of IPF, your doctor may recommend that you have a pulmonary function test or an imaging test, such as a high-resolution chest CT scan to look for scarring in the lungs. Now, a pulmonary function test is this really big fancy machine, and they have you take in as much breath as you can and blow it out as hard as you can. And what they're doing throughout that process is seeing, what your lung capacity is, how much you're able to push out, how much stays in the lungs after you've pushed it out. And those are the pulmonary function tests, meaning, how efficiently your breath is, you're breathing. Right. So most common symptoms are shortness of breath that gets worse over time. And the initial treatment will be oxygen, because if you're breathing, normal air, you're getting in a certain concentration of oxygen, right? Right. And if you use an oxygen compressor, a canister of oxygen, you can get an increased percentage of oxygen that you're breathing in. Now, what can happen with a lot of people is that they're not able to get enough oxygen in without being on additional oxygen. And the guy that we interviewed talked about how he rigged up in his car in the back seat oxygen concentrators so he could just switch them out while he was driving and going places. Okay. And people have to carry their tanks around with them because they would not be able to breathe without those tanks. The dry cough gets worse, bouts of coughing that you can't control. And what you should do is get a good pulmonologist who's familiar with IPF. That's the way that you're likely to get diagnosed the most efficiently. Like, you can go to your family practitioner and they may or may not know about IPF. They may say, oh, let me give you a round of steroids. Oh, let me, do this. Let me give you something to help you for the cough, and just treat the symptoms without realizing that what in fact is going on is IPF. And that is not uncommon. It's not uncommon. So things that you can do is adapting a healthy lifestyle is quitting smoking, being physically active as much as you can, which is really, really hard. There are pulmonary rehab places where you can go where there's professionals around, ride a stationary bike, that kind of thing, where there are people around. Yeah. The man that I interviewed talked about how he went for a bike ride, and I think if I remember correctly, he had like the dog with him or something, and the dog pulled him so far, and then he realized, I don't have enough air to get back.
Oh.
And so he had to get off the bike and very slowly, and he said it was only a couple of blocks, but it took him a long time, and it's pretty frightening to not make it back home.
Ugh.
Go for a healthy weight, have healthy eating, take care of your mental health. Counseling is important because if you're young and you're active and you're used to doing stuff and all of a sudden you're like, how come I can't get my breath?
Right, you can't even really climb up a couple steps. Right.
Yeah. There's medications there's a couple meds that can be prescribed, but like I said, all they can really do is slow down the progression of the disease. You want to prevent yourself from being in situations where breathing is more difficult, such as high altitudes or where the air quality is so poor from dust or pollination. They can give glucocorticoids, like cortisone, things like that, to help with the breathing, to help with the inflammation. But the only real treatment is to have a lung transplant. And I'm going to interview this guy again to talk about what you have to go through to get a lung transplant, because a lung transplant is pretty hard to get. You have to be in really good health. You have to not be smoking. You have to be at your ideal weight. You can't have other comorbidities. They're going to give the few lungs that are available to first, the tissue has to match, and then they're going to give it to the people who are in the healthiest physical condition to make the longest, best use of those lungs. Right. And, you hate to kind of think about it that way, but, if you have a rare commodity, you have to think about, who's going to get it? Right. How do you distribute those? So there's very, very strict criteria for who can get those. It's a long process of being in the hospital because there's always, risk of rejection. Some people do phenomenally well, and it's just such a gift for them to feel as though, they have their lives back. And it's another thing for, the rest of us to think about too is, on our driver's license, whatever state you're in, are you an organ donor?
Oh, organ donors, absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
And make, so because we never know what's going to happen to us, but there's people out there who would really benefit from our body parts when we're no longer able to use them. So that's IPF. What do you think of that one, Charlie?
Yeah, oh gosh. I mean, just the thought of not being able to breathe, or even what you said, it's the smallest of activity and you're out of breath. Or you mentioned the bicycle rider, had to get off his bike and slowly walk home so, he wouldn't collapse. But what you mentioned in the end about organ donors, that what we've talked about before about preparation. Just to let everyone to have your wishes known, have them written down on a healthcare proxy.
And make sure your family knows, because your family can override that. They can say, nope, I don't want that to happen. So you need to tell your family, I want this to happen, and don't interfere.
Well, it'll depend, because, for example, in New York, if you sign a donor card and your family says, no, I don't want my son to look like that, so all cut up. But if he's signed a card, that that card overrides anyone's wishes. I mean, that's how it is.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That's how it is.
That's not true.
Yeah, but
that's not true in every
right,
state.
Exactly. No, yeah. I know it's not true. No, but here it is. If someone signs, an organ donor card.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
But always the communication is great. To say to people,
absolutely,
your family.
Yeah,
I want this. I think it's important.
Yeah,
and we don't ever know, depending on what results in our death, if our organs are going to be acceptable. Like generally, if you have cancer, they're not going to use your organs because the cancer cells can be anywhere, and you don't want to pass those on with your lungs.
Yeah.
But a lot of things that cause our deaths can be makes our organs okay for donation.
Yeah.
So it's a tough disease, and my heart goes out to people who have this, and it's something that kind of the numbers are growing, and it's unfortunate that there's not enough understanding yet for treatment.
Why do you think the numbers are growing?
Well, I think people are living longer is one of the things.
Okay,
whenever you've got an aging population, you've got a greater risk of, we'll do Alzheimer's sometime, but something like Alzheimer's, if you die young, you're not going to get Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
So the longer we live, the more risk we're at for these other kind of age-related diseases.
Right.
Yeah. So, Charlie, you're going to do, what are you doing tonight? You're doing something, about working to death.
Yes, about, worked to death. Okay.
I can so relate to that.
Yeah. Can't we all at some point? So, we're going to talk about being worked to death. Killed while on the job. For example, the 6 wives of Henry VIII. To be accurate...
What was their job? What was their job?
Well, let me explain this in a limerick. So, to 6 wives he was wedded. 1 died, 1 survived, 2 divorced, 2 beheaded. Kids in England also learned this little limerick. Divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, survived. So basically, that was their jobs.
Their job was to be the queen and lose their head.
Yes, and
I thought I had it rough.
Yes, exactly.
Jeez.
So now you have nothing to complain about.
Well, I have to still think of something.
Now, remembering the specific names of each queen, it's a little more difficult. I mean, here when you learn, I don't know if did you ever learn to play piano?
Yeah.
Okay. So the scale, every good boy deserves fudge.
I learned every good boy does fine.
That's from the south side of Detroit again, right?
I guess. Do you remember all the names of the Great Lakes?
Yeah.
How did you remember them? How did you learn them?
There was
yeah.
I don't know, but yeah. I know. I remember there was. So I just, I think just like looking at a map, or maybe my father tested me and just pointed it out, and I just remembered.
No.
But there,
Holmes.
what was it?
Holmes.
Oh, okay. Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, and Satchmo.
Superior.
It's not Satchmo like Louis?
Only on the north side of Detroit.
Huh. Okay. I guess I was misinformed. Right. I just remember memorizing it at school. But I was in Catholic school at the time. So, yeah, I don't think the nuns were keen on little things like that. You would memorize these lakes. Now, schnell.
Huh?
You would memorize these lakes. Schnell. That's what I remember about the nuns. They spoke in German accents. It was only a couple of decades after the Great War. But yes, so with remembering the names
So the queens.
of the queens, all boys should come home, please. So ABSCHP. So breaking that down, it is the last initials of the queens. So all boys should come home, please. All Aragon, boys Boylan, should Seymour, come Cleves, home Howard, please Parr. Now, Catherine of Aragon had a daughter with Henry, Mary, who reigned as Mary I, also known as Bloody Mary, which had nothing to do with the cocktail invented at the New York bar in Paris, which later became Harry's New York bar. But I digress. Now, Catherine Howard and Anne Boylan were executed supposedly for committing adultery, though in actuality what seems to have happened is that Henry just simply grew tired of them.
Oh.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Tough crowd. It's a tough crowd, I tell you.
Really?
Jane Seymour, not the actress, died shortly after childbirth. So then we have Henry, as I mentioned, divorced two of his wives. Catherine of Aragon, again, Mary I's mom, Bloody Mary's mom, and Anne of Cleves. His last wife, Catherine Parr, outlived him. And speaking of others worked to death, Mary Ann, are you familiar with the 20-year presidential curse?
No.
Well, it's somewhat of a pattern that an American president, elected or reelected every 20 years, beginning in 1840 and ending in 1960, have died in office. Now, the exception to this, which of course everyone knows, I don't need to tell them, but I'm going to tell you anyways, was President Zachary Taylor. Now, so President Taylor was elected in 1848, obviously not a year ending with a zero in it, but he died in 1850. So, do you know who the first?
So who's
yes?
Who's the next one that's supposed to die according to this curse?
Well, this is the thing. It went all the way up through President Kennedy. And then 20 years after President Kennedy, Ronald Reagan was elected president. He, assassination attempt, of course. But he was so physically fit, and this was not released to the press at the time or to the public, but had he not been in such good physical condition, I mean, that bullet ripped through him. He would have died. But
wow.
But he survived. So we haven't had isn't there a band called Dead Presidents?
Yeah, I think so.
I think so too. Yeah. So we haven't had a dead president since. The next 20-year cycle, of course, with George Bush Jr. So there was a assassination attempt against him, but the biggest thing was he. and I'm laughing with the president, of course, not at him. So he is like in 2002, he just stepped out into the, lawn at the Rose Garden or something. And someone just, noticed that the president had a big shiner. And someone asked him, what is this about? And immediately he explained something about, remember what my mother always said. Chew your pretzels. And you know what? Mom is right. And President Bush went on to explain that he was watching some game on TV. and I'm laughing with the president, of course. So he's watching some program on TV and just munching on pretzels. And one time he did not munch. And he just, threw that bad boy in his mouth and he started the choke.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I remember that.
He passed out, obviously fell out of his chair, hit the floor, and that's where he got the shiner.
Wow.
So
it wasn't from Laura, huh?
I'm going to say no. She seemed like an awfully nice lady, but maybe she got fed up with something. Who knows? It's their private lives. I'm sure it'll come out in the movie of the week someday, some year. So with that, so President Taylor. So we go back to him, and again, he not elected in a year with a 0, but died in a year with a 0. But the first United States president to die in office, elected in 1840, and died in 1841 was William Henry Harrison. And he only died like a month after his inauguration from pneumonia. It seemed because, the weather was horrible on an inauguration day. But Harrison just decided, you know what? I'm president. I deserve a big parade. I'm not passing up my parade just for a little wetness, for a little rain. Yeah. Caught the pneumonia and lingered for a little while, and boom, they killed him. He died of pneumonia.
Yeah, prior to antibiotics, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Then, of course, the next president after that to die in office was President Lincoln. And he was the first United States president to be assassinated. He died the morning of April 15th, 1865. In 1881, James Garfield was shot, but survived for like 2 months before he died. William McKinley, reelected to a second term in 1900, died about a week after being shot. He died in 1901. Warren Harding, elected in 1920, died of a heart attack in 1923. After that, President Franklin Roosevelt died of cerebral hemorrhage in 1945. And of course, President Kennedy was assassinated, elected in 1960, assassinated in 1963. And then we already covered the 20-year cycle after that. And, lest we forget, this is 2020. It is an election year. Que sera, sera. We'll see what tomorrow brings.
Ugh, I don't even want to think about anything happening to anybody.
I know but it was weird. This just happened for all that time, and then suddenly it stopped. So yeah, just called a presidential curse.
Wow.
Yeah. So that being said, thank you all for witnessing. Thank you all for listening and witnessing. That's fine. That's good too. So
you sound like the Wascally Wabbit.
Kill the wabbit, kill the wabbit, kill the wabbit. Thank you for listening. Please stay tuned for future episodes of Everyone Dies. Our thanks to our executive producer, retired Major General David, our producer Sandy, John, our technical advisor, Molly, our Twitter correspondent, and our friends, family, and our loyal listeners who are supporting our work at Everyone Dies. This is Charlie Navarrete.
I'm Marianne Matzo, and we look forward to talking with you soon. Remember, every day is a gift.
Yeah. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
This podcast does not provide medical advice. All discussion on this podcast, such as treatments, dosages, outcomes, charts, patient profiles, advice, messages, and any other discussion are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your primary care practitioner or other qualified health providers with any questions that you may have regarding your health. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard from this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. Everyone Dies does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, practitioners, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned in this podcast. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast by persons appearing on this podcast at the invitation of Everyone Dies or by other members is solely at your own risk.